right. Hello, everybody. I think we are live on YouTube. It's always hard to tell. Welcome to Clear Vision Wednesday. This is my weekly live show, all things vision improvement, how you can improve your eyesight. And we're looking at all these different topics, all these different areas of our life that will affect our vision, our eyesight. And I did a previous episode. What is the difference between eyesight and vision? There's a big difference. But I'm super excited about today's topic because we're talking about balance. And the topic is actually, or the title is Balance Your Life by Closing Your Eyes. And I'm very excited to bring on my friend. Let me bring her on, Debi Robinson. Welcome to the show, Debi.
Hi, Claudia. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so we are in a group together, and we actually would just spend an event together this weekend, and we talked. You are a yoga therapist, you are a nutrition coach, and you focus on bone health, balance, and basically just right overall, like for women over 50, like really feeling healthy and strong. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this thing, or maybe clarify a little bit of what exactly you do.
Well, when I was 50 years old, my hip joint collapsed. I could not walk farther than 20 feet. And all day, every day, I wondered if my hip joint was going to snap off. And so I had to start thinking about my bones, which I never had done up until this point. So understanding or learning everything that I could about bones brought me into this place of, wow, I mean, 1 in 2 women will fracture a bone in her lifetime due to osteoporosis. So I had to start doing this preventative aspect of how do I stay as healthy as possible for as long as possible. So I'm a certified yoga therapist teaching the physical aspects of yoga, the breath work and the meditation. And I'm also functional health coach, and I run functional labs and look at how the gut or the internal health plays a factor in bone loss.
So that's super interesting. And I know we talked about vision because I used to actually teach yoga before COVID, right? I used to teach yoga, not on the level that you did. I just taught a class in the gym. And we all know how our eyes, how important our vision is, because the second we close our eyes, we are like in the tree pose, like say standing on one leg and you close your eyes, you're easily toppling over. So tell us a little bit about this aspect of how is our balance in life and how our vision, like how is that all connected, and how can we also improve it or train how we balance, and so that we don't fall and we don't trip and break hips.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about fracture prevention. So we want to strengthen our balance. And the number one thing that women say when I begin to work with them is, I'm losing my balance, or I don't have good balance, or my balance is terrible. So we think we need to learn how to stand on one foot. So a lot of the classes that I teach and work that I do is, let's do tree pose, or let's learn how to stand on one foot. And so we do that. And then people think it's just about your physical body. And it's not. The eyes play such an important role in balance. And so that was kind of something that I share with people, and something that for me was a learning moment.
Okay, so let's dive a little bit into that, because I think we want to differentiate between the physical balance, like the emotional balance, right? There's all these, or we call the outer and the inner balance. There's so many different aspects of that. So let's start with the physical stuff, the bones, the physical balance, because I hear that when I used to teach yoga, I would hear that also all the time. I'm super stiff. My balance is really bad. I'm really bad at yoga, right? So let's look at that first and maybe explain that all the little pieces a little bit, how that all works together.
Yeah, so when it comes to balance, there's actually 3 areas. There's the musculoskeletal, which is the nerves, the muscles, the joints. That's when you're standing on one leg. Where is your body weight in space? And your muscles are turning on. If your body weight goes too far forward, your front body muscles turn on so you don't fall. If you go to the back body. So that is the physical aspects. That's musculoskeletal or proprioception. Then there's also vestibular, which is head position. So where is your head in space, and the fluids that are in the ears? And then the next one is visual. And so the visual field, where your eyes are located, is going to play a role in the signaling in your body to the muscles, to the joints, to the bones. So when in yoga, when we teach postures, we talk about finding something called your drishti, which is your focal point. And when you are practicing a balanced posture like tree, which is one of the oldest and most traditional postures, standing on one leg, if you find a focal point, it actually helps you balance better. And so we know that the visual plays such an important role in that physical aspect of not falling.
Okay, which is so, and because I actually took a class from you this weekend and you had us close our eyes in tree pose, Vikshashana. And so I definitely struggled. We were also on the carpet. I struggled with the balance. So explain to us, why is that such an issue when we close our eyes, and why is that maybe a good thing to practice? Or maybe not. Tell us a little bit about, is that helpful to do, to
Yeah.
close our eyes?
Yeah, and that's important. Thanks for saying that, because it's not, people say to me, you made the comment, people say I'm not good at yoga. And that is one thing I hear. People are intimidated by the practice, thinking it has to look like this or it has to look like that. Here in the West, we usually have a certain body type, a certain ethnicity. It's usually certain women doing yoga. And and those that are going to film themselves are typically doing some of the harder postures. So we're intimidated thinking we have to do that. That's not the case. And so when you're practicing, you've got to practice to your ability. And so I love that you said that, Claudia, because being safe is the most important thing for all of this. You don't want to fall practicing yoga to practice not falling or to prevent falling. So when you're practicing a posture, tree pose can be enough with eyes open for many people, depending on where they come into this practice. But for those that have a stronger practice and you want to challenge yourself a little more, you could then go into either the vestibular center, which is moving your head in different positions when you're balancing, or the visual. So I would say to try the head position movement first, because your eyes are still open and you'll kind of know where you are in space. But to do the eye close, I always recommend, first of all, know if you have a pretty strong practice. Should you be closing your eyes in the first place? Because your inner intelligence will tell you, heck no, I'm not going to close my eyes. Or let me try this. So try with one eye first and try to close one eye and see how you do with that, or the other eye. To do both eyes, Claudia, I mean, I remember in my 30s when I was practicing yoga and I was really, really fit and had great balance. I remember then I could close my eyes for maybe like a minute, but now in my late 50s, as other things diminish, no matter how strong I am, no matter how much I practice all of this, there's things that are happening. So I would say, should you do it, check in with yourself and then try one eye at a time, and then maybe both eyes, or be near the corner of a room or have a chair nearby or something. But make sure you're safe when you do it.
I find this so fascinating because in my practice, in the Bates method, we do a lot of practices with eyes closed because we use a lot of memory, imagination, and visualization, right? Which is usually way easier with eyes closed. And then we also do it with eyes open where we can still continue to imagine something. So when we have our eyes open, we kind of like, I'm just kind of riffing off here. I'm just thinking like I have a better sense of where I'm in space, but maybe not. I also find it interesting sometimes just standing in mountain pose, like coming back to yoga, just basically 2 feet on the ground, right? And then like closing your eyes and swaying back and swaying forward and just kind of finding that center, because sometimes I feel like it's actually easier with eyes closed to really feel the center versus the distractions. And you know what I mean? Like, and vision comes into play. Like people nearsighted tend to lean forward, and people farsighted tend to lean back. So anything that you feel you would want to add to that idea of
Yeah.
feeling balanced with eyes closed?
Okay, so when your eyes are closed, you're going to go more into a place of feeling, because the information is shut down to the thinking brain, and you're going to come into the feeling. So when you're doing mountain pose, Tadasana, which is a great way to find alignment in your joints, which is critical to healthy aging, so you minimize wear and tear in your joints. And then when you're doing that swaying action forward and backwards, you're in the very somatic, you're in your body, you are feeling. So you're actually turning on your inner eyeballs. And this is something that I use when I'm teaching balance or fall prevention, is put your eyes in your feet. And so go into your body with your eyes, see in your body. So see and feel. And if you bring yourself into the somatic, you heighten the sensory aspect of where are you in space. So I love what you said. And, my population, I have to be careful. I teach yoga for a hospital. I teach to, at least 50, if not 60 plus. And safety is such an important thing for me. The whole thing that you just said about the visualization sounds amazing to me, to really get that horizon, to get, and even if you're doing mountain posture or tree, where you actually visualize what it's named after. And a mountain is a triangle, and a triangle is actually the strongest shape that we have in nature. And so whether you're visualizing a tree with roots growing out of your feet to hold you up like a tall palm tree or even a big oak tree, that could actually be another like really great way to practice balance for people, is to maybe even close their eyes, maybe near a wall where you're touching the wall or something, if you felt safe to do that. Like I would be able to close my eyes. I think you would as well. We're at a place in our lives where we practice a lot. We walk the walk. So I'm able to close my eyes, and I'm going to try that because I think that sounds pretty amazing.
But yeah, we can maybe at some point teach something together. We are also both in Los Angeles, so that's awesome. Um, so I want to come back to this kind of like, how would you approach, like, let's say I know I have osteoporosis. Maybe I know I have balancing problems, or even if you don't have osteoporosis, but just how would you begin? Like, what would you say? What's like maybe the top three things to strengthen your bones? Because one thing before you even answer that, we did a chat, we did it at this hotel, at this conference, and there was a chat. I mean, I was like, oh, chair yoga, like kind of like I want to move and sweat, but this was so fascinating because the chair is actually like like a prop. It teaches you your hip alignment. I mean, you had us do things because I never learned chair yoga, right? And so it was super interesting. And then you can lift up from the chair. Let's say you're on Warrior 2 and you can lift up from the chair, but you have that really solid foundation with the support of the chair. So that was super fascinating for me. But maybe you want to teach, like, how would you start if you're feeling like you're maybe 50, 60 and your balance isn't the best and you want to do something for yourself?
Okay, so our feet, think about your foot, whatever size it is, that foot is what transmits all that communication of where are you in space. So I think having strong feet, limber feet, and especially dancing ankles. So always bending toes, keeping your feet active. And I'll think you remember from the class that I taught when we were together is I brought so much awareness to our feet, especially pinky toe edges, where your arches were active and lifting so that you're starting that lifting sensation in your body. So if you have osteoporosis, fall prevention is the biggest thing to work on. So if you start with your feet, whether that's stretching your feet or doing single leg balance postures like tree pose or dancer, we brush our teeth on 2 feet for our whole lives. Start brushing your teeth on one. Start having conversations with people on one leg and start to bring more. So really feet is really important. Balance postures are important. And yeah, what you said about the chair, I teach live classes every week, and the chair class, people come to me and I say, listen, I'm going to take you to your edge and then some. I'm not going to push you, but I'm going to guide you to where you can go safely. And then I want you to challenge yourself, because the more you demand on a daily basis from your body and bones, the stronger they will be. And so chair poses, when we did what we were doing, we were seated, which means we had a very deeply bent hip joint and knee joint. We were already in a very deep flexion position in our joints. And so even for those that aren't that strong or haven't practiced a lot, even having spread legs at that position with that bend in your hip and knee and then weight bearing in them is going to stimulate your bones and your muscles. It's going to bring in more play or dancing hips, dancing ankles. The more flexibility, the more range of motion you have in your joints, the less likely the stress of a slip, trip, stumble, or fall will pull and potentially fracture a bone. So limber joints are critical to fracture prevention. So pay attention to your feet, practice single leg balance, and then do some of the postures in a chair without arms, some of those Warrior 2 side angle, those bent knee positions, because the wide spread legs, which it's amazing to me, I see hundreds of people every week, and I've seen thousands of people over the years. We don't spread our legs. in our lives. We don't. It's not a natural position for us. So if your foot is slipping away from you when you're slipping, tripping, or stumbling or falling, that pull in your hip joint might be enough to break the top of the neck of your femur or your pelvis. So practice when you're in a chair can be really great. So the chair is great. And then when we were trying to load those joints and lift up, no matter how strong you are, most people are not in that deep of a bent position in their hip and knee. So yeah, the chair, you could do great stuff and then focus on the alignment of the upper body. So I would say feet, single leg balance, practice spreading your legs or hips and loading in them. So putting a lot of different ranges of motion in hips would be the second thing. And then third thing is spinal posture and alignment. The ice cream cone analogy that I was teaching.
So yeah, explain that to us, because I think I used to have, I mean, my thanks to yoga and Pilates and learning, becoming a yoga instructor, I really got rid of all my lower back pain. But I think lower back pain is one of the most common reasons that people miss work. And so tell us a little bit about the spine, because obviously right at the top of the spine sits the head with the eyes and the ears. And there's also, we know there's a lot of postural components to vision and astigmatism, which you might not know about. But tell us a little bit about the spine, because the breath is a super important part of good vision. And also of when we teach yoga, we teach a lot of breath practices. And something simple, I was just seeing an old friend, and as we were in Boston, and she's like, I'm so tense all the time. Like, I hold my breath when I exercise. And I think that is very common. Like before I learned all this, I had no sense of the breathing that I need to do in order to, work out or whatever you want to call it. Like, can you talk a little bit about the breath and the spine and what you taught us there about the safe zone?
Yeah, okay, the safe spinal space. So half of all the fractures are in the spine. They're in the front of the spine. So even if you have pain in your back, a lot of times women will say, oh, I have a compression or a spinal fracture, and they'll point to the back of their spine, yet they're all in the front of the spine. So the space right below the heart to the belly button, there's 7 vertebrae there that are the most fractured. So I call it your safe spinal space. And I have people physically putting their hands underneath their heart and right at their belly button. And so this space here that's on your body, think about that throughout the day with whatever you're doing. You don't compress it, because if you compress that space, you're putting pressure on the front of your spine, which is physical. So you're going to fracture your spine, but also you're going to collapse your chest and you're collapsing your diaphragm. So we need the ability for our body to expand and bring in the breath. And that forward position is actually compressing the area that we need to expand. So that was one aspect about the breath and alignment and posture. But the other piece that I gave that's a good awareness piece is that think of your legs as an ice cream cone, like a sugar cone that's like a triangle going down. And then if you think of 3 scoops of ice cream, you have your pelvis, your rib cage, and your head. And so where that third scoop is, which is your head, matters probably for vision in ways that I don't understand, that is your forte. And then also if that head is far forward, where the head goes, the spine follows. And you're now going to start that forward movement, that compression of the chest cavity, which is going to restrict breath, which is going to affect vision, energy, detoxification. I mean, multiple body systems are affected by our breath.
As you were talking, I was just thinking how we say when somebody is like really giving in like a doormat, we say you're bending over backwards. When I'm thinking it's not really the case, because backward bends, I remember when I was teaching, we never do that. We never strengthen the back of the body, right? We never open the heart. So the back bending is something we don't do in daily life. We're always hunched over. That's what you were talking about, that compression of the front of the spine. So even doing some simple, like, bringing the shoulders back, some simple back bending, I think is so, so simple to kind of, to me, that makes me like powerful and joyful, versus when I'm bending over backwards because somebody has I feel like if anything, I would be more collapsing forward. I don't know, but that just popped into my head. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. And what you think about back bends, and overall, maybe explain what a back bend is, and how do you think how is it's important for our spinal health?
Totally. And so back bends are the opposite of forward bend. Forward bend is bending your body forward. The third scoop, starting that, putting pressure on the front of your spine. A back bend actually opens up the front of your spine. It's like what we would do in bridge posture or camel. It's going to open up, or locust posture on your belly. It's going to open up the front, stretch the front. And the other part of this, when it comes to bone health, we're actually pushing the back of the vertebra into itself. And that compressive force in the back of the spine is what stimulates the spine to get stronger. And the DEXA scan, which is the gold standard diagnostics for bone health, that is actually looking at the lumbar spine. So many women know that they have osteoporosis in their spine. It's one of the main areas that the diagnosis comes from. So the back bends is the way to create that stimulation that we want so that the bones will get stronger.
So that's strengthening. And by the way, we had a gentleman asking on YouTube if it's just for women. No. I mean, Kevin Edis is a friend of ours. He was diagnosed with osteoporosis at 35. So this affects men as well, but I think it's more common with our hormones for women to struggle with those things. So I remember doing physical therapy for my lower back issues in my 20s, and I had to do a lot of laying on the belly and, like what they call swimming and Pilates, but you're like basically, yeah, you're strengthening your back muscles. So I think that is so underrated. And you had us do rotations, which is also, you want to talk a little bit about rotations maybe before we get more to the emotional aspects?
Yeah. So the two things you really need to be careful of when you're practicing yoga, if you have osteoporosis, is you don't want to forward fold your spine. Does not mean you don't want to forward fold. You want to forward fold in the hip joint, because we bend forward all day, every day. So learning how to bend forward safely is important. And then the other thing is rotation. So whenever you are moving, I call the heart lights by your heart and hip lights. Whenever your heart lights are moving away from your hip lights, which are pointing forward, that's rotation. And so rotation, you want to be careful you don't go to a end range of motion that has a lot of tension on a fragile spine if you happen to be in the higher negative zone with your osteoporosis diagnosis. But you just want to be lengthened and then add that rotation. And rotation, because of the way that the muscles are in the spine, the multifidi muscles are like little shoelaces that go up and down our spine from many different angles. And so when we do rotation, we're pulling on the bone here, 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 here. And the lines of force at which we pull or push into the bones is what causes bone remodeling to build stronger bones. So spinal rotation safely done is one of the most effective ways to strengthen your spine.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think I think it's really important to learn this in a really well-taught class or even in private sessions to really understand how all this works. But let's talk a little bit about inner balance or emotional balance, right? We have the elections coming up in the United States. We have a lot of turmoil all over the world. It seems it's getting worse. The heat waves and all the stuff that's happening nowadays. And maybe people 100 years ago thought the same. Dr. Bates, one of the foremost vision educators, ophthalmologists, he taught in this book from 1920, the busyness of the modern world in the cities. I'm like, if they only knew. But what are your thoughts on that whole of like the emotional balancing piece or the inner balancing? Do you want to share something or some thoughts or some tips that you have on that?
Oh, yeah. Well, let's talk about the start line. So the start line of breakdown, of disease, of ill health starts with what we consume. It starts in our mind. It's what we consume with our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth, and what we put ourselves around. So when we talk about news or what we're listening to, what we're watching, this is why I say close your eyes for inner balance. Stop participating in what you're bringing in. The optic nerve can bring in stimulation. 80% of what we bring into our mind comes through the optic nerve, which is what we're watching. So the start line is in the brain. And what I mean by that is the biochemical start line is there, because the signal goes from the primitive brain, and it could be conscious or subconscious triggering. So let's say more from a conscious, like here you are, you know what you're watching, you know what you're doing. So this is not always understanding that subconscious trigger that happens, but conscious trigger is you're watching something that disturbs you. So now you have a signal down to your adrenal glands. Your adrenal glands are going to secrete your cortisol, which is your stress hormone. That is your fight flight response. So the on switch is turned on for get the heck out of here. This is scary. This is dangerous. When that happens, blood sugar needs to be released into your body, or if it's in storage, it needs to be broken down. So it's a catabolic or a breakdown hormone. Now you have blood sugar. Why? Because your blood needs to go to your big mover muscles. You need to run. You need to get out of here because the tiger is chasing you. And then when you have blood sugar in the system, you need insulin to be secreted from your pancreas because insulin is the key that opens up the cell door that lets the blood sugar come in. And when we have chronic insulin secretion, then inflammation is triggered. And we live in a time of most diseases are inflammatory diseases. Osteoporosis is an inflammatory disease. So the start line is how are you showing up in life? What are you watching? I say, what are you eating with your eyes? We know that if we eat too much food, bad things happen, right? On many different levels. We eat with our eyes and we don't pay attention to that, Claudia. I tell my students or people I work with, you're literally putting yourself in the center of the city and allowing yourself to be stoned or flogged. They're doing this, they're doing that, they're taking this. Oh, look over there and this and this. And you're there and you're beating yourself up by what you're watching, what you're listening to, what you're paying attention to. You're wrecking your peace. You're creating internal imbalance that leads to disease and sickness and pain and suffering.
I think that is so important what you said. It's really that, the news, the information that you let in, even if you get up in the morning, and we've all been guilty of that. We look at our messages, or before you even have a conscious thought about the day, you're already inundated. And a lot of times it is not always pleasant. Sometimes it's nice things, but we don't know. When we open up that phone in the morning, we don't know what's going to hit us. Is it something nice? Is it something not so nice? Something scary? And in vision, we talk a lot about the nervous system and the stress levels, because when you are stressed, your vision is also compromised. Your peripheral vision shuts down, your pupils dilate, you have that whole stress response. So a lot of my work is really about getting back into that relaxed nervous system state, and learning. I mean, there's a lot more to it, but that's kind of a foundation of everything we do. So what are your tips in terms of that? Like, other than limiting, do you have any specific tips in terms of the mental, emotional, like things that we let into us from that perspective? And then I do want to also touch on the gut health and for bone health, right? Like, what do you recommend in terms of nutrition? But let's close it up with this mental, emotional piece. Any kind of specific tips that you have for us?
Yeah, first of all, if you go into a dark room, you don't know what's in that room. Is there furniture in there? Could you walk through the room? Are you going to bang on the sofa, the coffee table? You don't know until you turn the light on. And when you turn the light on in the room, you know what's there. So raising your awareness to the fact that what you look at is going to stimulate a biochemical reaction in your body. And what you just said about the eyes, that constant dilation and a constriction of the blood of the eyes, right? Open, close, open, close, open, close. Those are all muscular actions. With our blood vessels are innervated. The nervous system is around the blood vessels, and they're either going to contract or release, contract, release, get big, small, big, small. Well, over time, when I was studying yoga therapy, it's a 1,000-hour training. We're trained by a lot of physicians, and the cardiologist that trained us, he actually was on Dean Ornish's program for reversing heart disease. He said what they used the most for these folks were really, really sick, was yoga and relaxation techniques and meditation. Because he said the blood vessels with that lining around them, they're muscular. And he said eventually the blood vessels become like a big bodybuilder guy. And typically bigger bodybuilders are not super agile and mobile. Same thing with blood vessels. So this is then going to get into blood pressure and into all the cardiovascular markers. So it's a much bigger issue than we realize, is that we show up every day in our lives. How are you going to live your life? What are you going to watch? What are you going to eat? What are you going to listen to? What are you going to smell? What are you going to touch and taste? All of that matters, Claudia, for who are you? How healthy are you? And for finding balance, whether that's being able to stand on one leg or finding internal balance that helps you be the healthiest version of yourself.
Right. So yeah, I think that's amazing. And so balance, I mean, we talk about the gut microbiome, we talk about work-life balance. Like balance is this kind of hot topic, but I think it is so important, whatever angle you want to see to that. But feeling balanced to me means, first of all, the eyes, both eyes are participating, right? There is a balance between your eyes, between the left and the right side. We can go on and on, the ears, the hands, the strength of the legs, all these different things, but it's also like balancing your emotional, mental outlook on life. So I love all the tips that you were giving. So let's finish up with the gut. So because obviously we want to like give everybody watching some tips on what they can do in addition. So you had the yoga poses, the standing on two legs, the balancing, you had those steps, closing your eyes. What else would you say when it comes to nutrition, like the actual food that we're eating?
Okay, so gut health is really important. We are 90% bacteria. We're only 10% human cells. We are all bacteria. And I run stool labs. And what I find quite often is those that have more mental, emotional stress in their mind seem to also have all this craziness going on with their gut microbes. So there's the gut brain link, which we hear it's the gut's the second brain. Well, I specialize in the gut brain bone link because our bones is like the bank that holds all the minerals that are actually going to run the show, that are going to help you to build your muscles and get all of your body systems to function. So when you're imbalanced, when you're not managing your stress, you're eating all that stuff with your eyes, then that's going to have an effect on the gut. So the gut, again, just like the blood vessels, and you were saying the eyes are reacting to the nervous system response. So is the gut. The gut is lined with the nervous system. You are either in a place to digest or get the heck out of here. And if you're in the get the heck out of here because you just watched, listened to, or smelled, or whatever it is you did, even foods, when we're bringing in foods that are not healthy, that are stimulatory, that are going to not be in our best, healthiest position. It's not just what are we watching, it's what are we eating? How are we showing up? Because all of that is going to have an effect on, is your body thinking it needs to run and get to safety? Or are you in the place to rest, digest, repair, restore, build better, stronger bones and muscles?
Yeah. So give us maybe some tips, like what kind of foods, and I know this is very individual a lot of times, but like what things should we 100% avoid when it comes to our bone health? Because again, we want to make sure that we have good balance. So we all will trip. We all trip. There is no way to avoid that. Once in a while we trip, right? But we want to be able to catch ourselves and not break bones when we do that. So what are things that you should eat or not eat when it comes to building stronger bones? We talked about exercise. We talked about the mental, emotional components of what kind of things you let in. But what about the actual physical food?
Yeah, so with bone health, there are things we have to avoid. We have to avoid gluten. Gluten is not good for a lot of different aspects. It's terrible for thyroid health, contributes to gut holes in your gut, which is known as leaky gut. So gluten is terrible. It also affects fat metabolism. There's two really important fat soluble vitamins, vitamin D, vitamin K, that are on the top of the list for building stronger fracture-proof bones. So we need to avoid gluten, avoid dairy, because dairy is inflammatory. And studies show that countries with the highest dairy consumption have the greatest or the highest number of fractures. So
Sorry, can I interrupt? Can I interrupt really quick? So this is the thing, right? I've been plant-based for 12 years, but I really, because we've been told you have to eat dairy to get strong bone. I mean, this has been the biggest, in my opinion, right? Like marketing campaign ever. But you know what I mean? It's been like ingrained into our heads. So can you just briefly explain that a little bit? Like I know gluten we talked about, it's inflammatory. I'm German, right? I grew up on gluten. I mean, beer, bread. I mean, German is gluten, you know. Um, so I've learned about these things and I had to get off gluten myself. So for my own journey, even though everybody thinks I don't have celiac disease, but for gut health, you're absolutely right. But explain a little bit about the dairy, because I feel like this is what we've been told all our lives, is that we have to, in fact, that you get broken bones when you do not eat dairy.
yeah, women, and almost every woman I work with, and for the gentleman that's on here, 80% of the people with osteoporosis are female. It's mostly females but I do work with men, and I have worked with men over the years. So the thing about dairy is this. We have part of it is the processing that we do it with our cows. We artificially inseminate them, take away their calves the minute they're born. We have them all crowded together. When we milk a cow, we have a metal on her teats to get the milk out. There's blood and pus. And for anyone who's nursed children, I have 3 children, there's blood and pus when you nurse a baby. So when the blood and pus goes into the milk, we now have to use antibiotics in order to manage that. So now you have that in your milk. If the cows were fed grass or grain that was sprayed with glyphosate, you now have the exposure to glyphosate from what they were eating that then became their milk. So that's some of the ways that we manage the creatures that we get the milk from. Then there's other things. Do we properly assimilate calcium molecules? We're not really sure. And then the other things, I run food sensitivity labs. I run blood labs to look at immune response to foods. And I test dairy. And I'm going to say that 85 to 90% of the people I've tested for dairy, there's 2 certain proteins that that a lot of people are sensitive to. And then there's other proteins that actually mimic retina. There's a retinal overlap that actually, if your body makes an immunoglobulin to this item in dairy, it could also maybe attack the retina because it's mimicry. And when your immune system is making soldiers to protect, it doesn't always say just if it looks just exactly 100% like that. It's if it looks like that and anything that looks like that. So there's a retinal overlap. There is a pancreas overlap as well. So it's just that dairy, yes, the Got Milk campaign or all those campaigns, maybe, who's behind all this, the Dairy Association, it's wrong. And could you have a cow that you would be raising to give you enough milk for you to eat yogurt every day, drink milk every day, and eat cheese every day? You have to think about what makes sense. Would we be consuming these large amounts of dairy? No, and we didn't.
And I thank you for that. And I know you're not plant-based, so this is not about being, the vegan show here or something like that. But I think what you just said, you run these sensitivity tests, you see the actual data of what people come back with and issues. And I had the same thing with gluten. So I work with a doctor as well. So it's not like something I'm like, oh, I need to jump on that train. So what are some good foods? I want to wrap this up, but what are some foods that maybe all the people that you work with that you find that most people do not eat enough of that we really need for good bones and good balance?
I think that, of course, we have nutrients that are really important. The 4 musketeers, vitamin D, vitamin K, magnesium, and calcium. Those are the most important. Calcium in food is the best. I don't recommend calcium supplementation because it's not a matter of do you have enough calcium? Is the calcium staying in your bones? So you have to look at the internal balance and run functional labs and kind of figure out why is it coming out of your bones leading to osteoporosis. So when I think of what foods to eat, I don't just think about what foods are good for bone health. I think what foods are going to support digestion, gut health, support bone building beneficial bacteria in your gut, because without a healthy gut, you can't have healthy bones. So the foods to eat are the foods that are going to support digestion or support the good gut microbes. And those are things like there's also practices too. Don't drink your liquids with your meals. Don't drink your beverages with your meals. You don't want to dilute your stomach acid. So drink water before you eat, about 30 minutes to an hour to prepare the system. When you eat, chew your food, let it digest in your mouth. Actually, it starts with the eyes, because what you're choosing to eat, what you see, and we're so tempted. I mean, Claudia, flaky, shiny sourdough bread or croissants look so beautiful, right? So we really start, what foods are we going to make choice with what we see, our eyes? So you want to support digestion. You want to have probiotic and prebiotic rich foods. These are things like fermented foods, sweet potatoes. A lot of the root vegetables are great. Eat seasonally. Go to your farmer's market, dark leafy greens. And to be honest with you, Claudia, most of the nutrients that we need to build bones are in the plant kingdom, most of them. So eating enough plant-based foods, nuts, seeds, vegetables, legumes, is where you're going to get most of the main nutrients and all the cofactors for bone building.
That is so fascinating. And I know you work with people individually, and sometimes we have to really look at one-on-one. I am not a fan of these big lists like eat these 10 superfoods because they might be not that good for you. But I love what you just explained. So we really need to get the minerals into the bones. We need to look at the gut. Without the healthy gut, none of this is going to happen. So what I learned, like, no, you don't recommend dairy or gluten. And again, dairy, talking about the general dairy, the mass-produced things that we talk about that we have here. Um, Eat locally, right? Go to your farmer's market, get a variety of plants. Anything else that you want to add, or any like your final tip that you want to give everybody here today? And I'm looking at questions too. So while you formulate that in the head, I'm going to look if you have any questions live on YouTube.
I'm going to say that food is medicine and food is also poison. And so there's three main areas that lead to stress that will break down your bones and lead to other diseases as well. The first is the musculoskeletal. So make sure you're moving your body every day. It's one of the most powerful things we could do. Stand on one leg when you're brushing your teeth, when you're washing your dishes, when you're talking to your friends. Then pay attention to what you're eating with your eyes or listening to. So what are you consuming? Because we know that when we eat food, we have to digest it, absorb it, assimilate it, and eliminate it, right? We need to make sure we're pooping every day so that we know our system is functioning. But we also need to digest, absorb, and eliminate what we eat with our senses, our eyes and our ears. So pay attention to what you're looking at with your eyes. And then finally, yes, no gluten, no dairy, and also sugar. We didn't say that. And so just do your best. Do your best, leave the rest. That's what my teacher in India teaches me. You don't want to there's information overload, so it can be really stressful learning. Do your best, leave the rest.
So we got one question on YouTube, and I think it's going to be good for everybody. So to wrap this up, can you explain by what you mean by osteoporosis being an inflammatory disease?
Yeah, well, we're actually going to be labeling that soon. That's pretty much what we're understanding. Inflammation is the root cause of almost all illness. It's really it's your body attacking. And so when you have imbalance inside, your bones store the minerals that run the show. And so whenever there's something happening in the body, the 7 root causes of bone loss, inflammation is one of them, stress is another, mineral imbalance, hormone imbalance, toxicity, acidity, and being sedentary. Those are the root causes. So an inflammatory disease is whenever your system needs fuel, like the car needs gas. Well, the gas to run the system are the minerals that are stored in the bones. So our bones dissolve what they're storing to run the show. And so it is actually, I mean, I interview on my podcast a lot of physicians, and it's the terminology that's being used more and more in the functional medicine space now, that osteoporosis is an inflammatory disease.
That makes so much sense. Well, thank you. I've been balancing on one foot the whole time. So this is a great thing, guys. If you come to a live show like this one, then just start by balancing. I'm out at my standing desk. You can watching this standing or just watching TV standing for a moment on one leg. Thank you so much. Where can people find you or maybe work with you? Give us a little bit of a overview.
Well, my name is Debi Robinson, Debi Robinson. So I have a website, debirobinson.com. There's a lot of information on there. My YouTube channel, Debi Robinson Wellness. I have hundreds of recorded classes and webinars. Healthy Gut, Healthy Bones is my signature program. And that's my main focal point at all different levels, whether you work with me privately or you come into a group or you do an online course.
Awesome. This was so fascinating. So we're starting with the gut. And I love how you pointed out how everything is so connected. So do something, find something you enjoy, and if that's not yoga, I think there's so many other things that we can do in terms of helping to strengthen our bones, our balance, and really looking at, what you take in through your eyes, through your mouth, right, all over. So this was really, really fascinating. Thank you so much, Debi. And we have all the links right underneath the video. So they're all there, your Instagram, your YouTube, your Facebook, you have a podcast like you mentioned. So any last words you want to share with us here on YouTube, Debi?
So Stronger Bones Lifestyle is the name of my podcast. And I am interviewing mostly functionally minded medical doctors because I'm on a mission to change the way we view this disease, osteoporosis. It is not a progressive degenerative disease that we get as we age. It is a lifestyle disease. And so we can change the trajectory of our bone health.
I love that, Debbie, because that's exactly aligned with what I do. It's like, yes, are we getting older? Yes, right? Do we have to just like, there's nothing we can do. We just get older and now everything is falling apart. Thank you so much. Goodbye, YouTube. We see you next week, and we have our little private discussion here now in the Clear Vision Club. So